ain't got a bicycle. Dad said, well, it's a long walk. So finally Dad told me, he says, well, I tell you what. He says, you find a bicycle and I'll pay for it, and you can pay me out of what you make. David Samuels went to work for my dad, 50 cents a week, and paid for a $10 bicycle. I don't know how long it took, but he paid for it, delivering newspapers for my dad, 50 cents a week.
So your daddy started off on you.
That's right, that's right. Well, enough about Mr. Big.
I have a question. Holland Court.
Holland's Court was owned by Richard Holland and Ruby, his wife, and it was out at the
Still out there.
it's the CS, though it was a CS at one time.
The Wildcat Inn now.
Well, whatever it is, it's certainly not the Holland's Court. We had as nice a motel in Holland's Court as it was in the state of Georgia.
Well, Mr. Howard wouldn't have had anything other than a nice.
And it was on 341, and to get from Atlanta to Middle Georgia, you had two choices: Highway 41 and Highway 341. And he located his right on the corner there, right behind what used to be the not game and fish, but the peach
Inspectors.
Yeah, and peanut inspectors have an office there. It's the next little building.
We're going
But
to
he-
Harriet's on your left.
On the left, right, yeah. But it was a wonderful place. Oh man, he was uptown. He had a swimming pool. This is back in 1940, and he had a swimming pool. Everybody swimming. Now this is a picture of my dad's store inside, and you see the bag that Bobby Hartley has around his shoulder. That's the way we delivered newspapers. You could ride your bicycle and pull them out of that sack, fold them, and throw it on the porch. My dad is on the left, and one of his only employees is the man with the other apron on.
What are the prices on those big cans?
That's a gallon can of peaches for 15 cents. All of these three boxes on your left up here, those are penny wheel crackers. We had a little bitty meat market that told you where they wanted just a bench, maybe. But you could sell those penny wheel crackers and a nickel worth of cheese, and the man was good to go for the rest of the day.
Where is that store?
This is where Westmoreland was. It's adjacent to the hole in the wall. This is
Well, is that now, the clock shop?
no. This is across the street from that. This is by Dee's Flowers.
Oh, okay.
Dee's Flowers is the building that part of the hole in the wall was attached to. So, and this is the other building.
Okay.
Now this is Dad's store in about 1950, and what is interesting, and when James said he was going to leave it in, I questioned it, but I call your attention to, on the right-hand side, under the Coca-Cola sign, those are gym sets of the day, and those stayed out all the time. All of the wire and galvanized pipe was left out 24/7. To our knowledge, we never lost a roll of wire or a piece of pipe. So, this is on the corner of Central Avenue and Camellia.
What kind of paint is that?
That was Warren's Paint and Colorizer. Nashville, Tennessee.
Wow. What, did y'all sold it all? Some bicycles? And
Oh yeah. Oh,
This was not the last
It
location.
was a hardware store.
now, we sold anything from peanuts to hoop cheese.
But Nick, when your daddy finally owned it, the final ownership, was it all three of those? I don't remember.
No, we never owned this. I can tell you a funny story about this. This was owned by Charles Evans. His dad had been down there several years, and I went to work in that store in 1954, and I was about, I don't know, 21, and I worked there a few weeks, a few months, and I asked Dad, I said, how much rent are you paying? He told me. I said, man, that's too much. And he said, well, don't you mess with Mr. Evans. John had a reputation of being right tight.
But y'all didn't, those three stores.
We never, no, that's just one store. You had three entrances.
But at the end, you didn't have three entrances to y'all's.
Well, this is not where we were. You see the little white building there?
Yeah.
That's Marshman's warehouse, and then. the
That's
Mar-
where y'all were?
Yeah, that's where we were.
Okay,
So,
gotcha.
but anyway, long story short, I went to Mr. Charles as a brash 21-year-old, and I said, Mr. Charles, you charging us too much. He said, well, how much am I charging? I said, well, you charging something, I don't even remember. He says, well, that sounds all right to me. I said, well, we're not doing but so much. He said, well, what do you think you ought to pay? I said, well, it's your building, you tell me. He reduced the price of the rent because we weren't selling as much stuff as he thought.
Where did you live?
So, well, that's a tribute to Charles Evans. He was a great guy, and he got a little knowledge, and he knew he was charging too much. Of course, it might not have been but $100.
Was that Norman Young?
Oh, that's Shepherd Insurance.
This is, I believe this lady might have been a Irby at some point, Ms. Jones, but it was an interesting picture of Shepherd's Insurance and Realty Agency at that time. Just a classic photo. She obviously worked there, but
L.E. Jones was a plumber. If any of you remember where Hallman and Honeycutt were on the corner where the stationery store is now, it was 2 step up there, and that's where L.E. Jones had his plumbing shop, and this is Ms. Jones. But the Joneses and the Shepherds, they were very good friends, and she could have just been visiting there.
What was her first name, do you know?
I do not. But L.E. was a Baptist, I remember that. He was right regular coming to church.
go ahead.
Now, where was that insurance?
The insurance office was adjacent to Edwards Closing Company. It was between Edwards and the 64 Tire Company.
You can send it the next
Where,
one.
where the college now has an office thing area over there.
Yeah.
There it is, Edwards, the mail there.
I called Bobby Holly to get some information. I mean, I knew Mr. Mayo, obviously, but some things I did not know about him is he owned one of the same oil companies that we had. He also owned a Studebaker dealership. Of course, he eventually owned the Shepherd Realty and Insurance, and that's where Bobby Holly and Billy Holly, they worked there with Mr. Mayo for a long time.
And David Simmons.
I didn't
Yeah,
know.
David
Yeah,
was
yeah.
right there. He was there before Bobby was.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. And one other thing he shared with me was Mayo was our first Peach County Chamber of Commerce president. I did not know that. Of course, Gloria's his wife. Y'all know Gloria.
What's that, is it the Squabble or?
Oh, I'm glad you caught that. Swabo. He was in the Navy in World War II. And so that was a nickname. I looked up in this one of those books that's got all the war records of Peach County folks, and sure enough, he served in World War II in the Navy. So that was just a nickname.
People swap dicks.
Go ahead. Chris Sacalari.
Yeah.
I got to talk about this one a little bit, Nick.
Yeah.
Chris was a Greek guy, and he was a great guy too. But he owned the Liberty Cafe. I got to admit, I got the slide there wrong, but it was also called the Fort Valley Cafe. But I always knew it as Chris's Cafe. When I grew up, we used to stay open on Saturdays till 9 or 10 o'clock. In fact, they stayed longer than that. But I remember they used to have supper breaks for the clerks and all. And we always used to go, you changed it. Thanks. But anyway, we used to go across the street and get hamburgers at this place. That's what I remember. It was either Pete and Gus hot dogs or hamburgers from Chris's place. And he's standing out there in front of the store. What's significant about it is this later became the Parsan Men's Store, and eventually this became the Corey's Men's Store. This is where we're located today. Go ahead, Rich.
The one thing in that place was where the kids hung out in town on Saturday night, and they had a record player in there, things, whatever, where you could go and put your money in there, and so.
Oh, yeah,
And that's where
I
all the
remember
kids hung out for a long time.
But he served really good meals.
Well, since Destiny brought that business of hanging out, 1946, we went out in Washingtonville and played a basketball game. And Saul Vining, local fella, he called the game. He was from Washingtonville. Well, it was a big mess, and Jackson, you might have been on this team. Anyway, long story short, after Fort Valley finally won at a squeaker and so forth, all the Fort Valley guys come back and they go to Chris' Cafe. Well, all of a sudden, the referee comes in. Saul Vining comes in. Well, that was the wrong thing to do. So a scuffle breaks out. Well, back in this day, when you sold beer, you had to pay a 5-cent deposit on the bottles. And those boys got to fighting and scuffling and carrying on. And Mr. Chris was going around wringing his hands and said, "Don't break the beer bottles, don't break the beer bottles." We weren't worried about tying on the table. We didn't want to leave no beer bottles.
Also, now, Chris Sacalaris was Helen Mullis' dad.
That's right,
Remember
yeah.
Helen?
Yeah. Well, it was a great family, great family.
Trapping Avenue.
Go ahead, next one. This is inside, notice it's got Liberty Cafe, at the top, but that's his wife, and I do not know her name. Does anybody remember her first name?
Bill Sackalot.
But anyway, look at that. I remember those tile floors. That was a black and white tile on the floor there. He got cigars, Habitampas. They were a nickel back then. But I remember those tables. I just remember going in that place as a young boy with my parents and eating there all the time. It was a neat place.
Now, where was that located?
This is where Corey's Men's Store is, right? This is our current stores, and
Okay.
this store was in existence to about 1964 or 5, and then the Parhams moved across the street to their men's store. It was Parsan Men's Store, and they remodeled that, I believe, in 65, and they were there about 20 years to 85, and then they closed that down. And we were there. We've been there since 87 in this location. But that's our building right now.
His
That's how it used to
cafe was known as one of the cleanest ones in Fort Valley, too.
Go ahead, Rick.
What year was that, would have been?
Back up, let's see. It looks 40s to me.
Yeah, this is
It was in the 40s,
okay.
44, 46, 47, 48.
God.
Go ahead. I got some menus from back then, and flip on one more ahead and these come back. At the top, you notice then it says Fort Valley Cafe, and it says Crest, C-H-R-E-S-T, Sacalaris Proprietors. The ladies and gentlemen, open day and night. But look at, we'll go back to the menu, but look at some of the other businesses that were there. Fort Valley Motor Company, the Ford dealership, Georgia Basket, Georgia Grocery, Bartlett's, I talked about Mr. Hurd Bartlett, the Atlanta Ice and Cold, J.F. Floyd. I don't have a picture of his store. Williams and Evans Garage, I'm not familiar with that, or the Abe Glass, and then Everest Brothers is prime. Back up, these are the advertisers on the menu. I've got to point out some things here. A small steak was 45 cents. A small steak with eggs was 65. You could get a porterhouse steak with onions for 90, or a double porterhouse for $2 for $1.40, and a double porterhouse for $3 for $1.80. Cornflakes, breakfast was 20 cents. You know, all the cereal was 20 cents. It's just unreal. Bananas and cream was 20 cents. Tea was a nickel. Buttermilk was a nickel. Homemade pies were a dime.
Hamburgers were dime.
But this was the menu, and I guess he had meal tickets, it says.
And these people made money now. These people made money.
And this is time I'm going to divert just a little bit since we're talking money. I've got to bring out I've brought some things I was going to pass around. The 1940s, as you remember, was the war years. And some of the things that were different, our money was different. And I'm going to pass these around. I hope we get these back. This is a 1943 quarter, and obviously has silver content. Now, all of our coins did up until 1964. But this quarter would have got you, it could have got you potatoes au gratin or whatever. You could have added a little bit changed with it, got your pork roast and gravy. The dimes were the Mercury dimes, not the, well, the Roosevelt dimes came later. The $50 were the Liberty walking, if y'all remember those. And something else I wanted to bring out was, I want to pass, go ahead and pass these around and let them kind of just reminisce about how the coins used to look back then. But something else was interesting. In 1943, they came out with the zinc pennies. They were steel pennies coated with zinc because there was a shortage of copper in the war. So for 1943, and these are uncirculated. These are, you may, some of you older folks might remember, most of the time they look real dark gray after they've been in circulation. But these look like dimes, they're so shiny because they're uncirculated. That's because of the shortage of the copper that were used in the war effort. But that's, I just had to bring that out because of the change that you could buy meals with back then. And we kind of talked about that already. Go ahead, Rich. I don't know exactly how old Mr. Buddy was then, but the strange thing about this picture, I've later determined that this photograph is reversed when the photographer did it, because Nick, what was this building here? Was a Big Star Grocery, a little store? Big Star. And you can see something there. The writing is backwards, but anyway, Mr. Buddy was riding a forklift back then, and of course everybody knows what he did. That's Bluebird right there. That's not Bluebird, but I mean he is Bluebird. Again, these were just random shots that Mr. Bennett Rigdon took. That's just, you know, these were folks he decided he was going to take a picture of one day, and Mr. Buddy, I think, was one of them. Go ahead. I'll let you talk about him.
This is Mr. Lee Howard. Mr. Lee Howard lived in a two-story house right across from the Methodist Church on the corner of Miller and Church Street. He ran a gin house behind Bill Carruthers and Sue Carruthers' home on now Camellia Boulevard. It used to be South Macon Street, Camellia Boulevard. You know where the fertilizer plant is? It's he had a gin right between the where the oil mill is now. Excuse me, the fertilizer place now, and Bill Carruthers' lot, and he ginned cotton right there.
Nick, tell me that's Dolly Horton's house.
Oh, excuse me. Well, I don't.
I mean, they were in the father then.
Dolly Horton now lives in Bill and Sue Carruthers' home on the corner of
Right?
College,
Street in South
49.
Camellia.
So you ran a gin house?
He ran
Not
the gin
drinking
shop.
gin, Connie.
Cotton gin.
He didn't drink. He might have drank a little gin. I'm not sure about that. But he ginned cotton Now, that group we may get later.
But he was far divorced from that, wasn't he, Pete?
Oh, yeah,
He would not
absolutely.
even take the Sunday newspaper because he didn't want to put anybody to work on Sunday. That's the truth all his life.
Yeah, he was pulling the church. Pull up Fort Valley.
Is that Claire's?
He said, what?
Claire's father?
No.
Different house.
Well, you got one back, James.
Oh, this was a Buffalo.
Now, who is it?
Henry Matthews.
Mayor, would you like to comment on this
I
bill?
will. My Uncle Henry, that was my Uncle Henry, whom we called Unc, and he was 8 years younger than my father, and my father adored him, he adored my father. He was a lawyer. He went off to the FBI during the war, and then he came back, and my grandmother was still alive, and we were living in that house where the Lily of the Valley used to be. And so he moved in there with my grandmother, and we moved to the house on Miller Street. And he was just, he always loved Beth and me. He'd always been his neat presents. I've still got a cowboy vest that he bought me. Red and yellow. And then he died of a heart attack when he was relatively young, 70-something. But he got married and had a daughter. And I'm going to eat lunch with that daughter tomorrow. I forgot about that. But all the Matthews men married late, and he was 40-something when he married. They sort of spoiled this girl, but she turned out real good, you know. to be spoiled like she was. They had doted on her.
Why was he incorrigible?
Nick is tongue in cheek. He wasn't. He was a tennis player. He was a tennis player.
Great tennis player.
Yeah.
Well, he had his own tennis court and he let people come play.
All right, what Nick is
That's
saying,
right.
incorrigible bachelor, he was a bachelor when all the other men in town were having to get married. They weren't having to get married, but they were
Some of them
but they were getting married, and he just remained a bachelor. And you know how men are. Whenever there's a married man, he always wants a man that's not married to get married. You know what I'm talking about? What would it?
If you know, getting married is like kind of getting in a tub of hot water. If you stay in it long enough, you'll get used to it.
What were you gonna say, Pete?
I was gonna say that, William Jennings Brown married,
Yeah.
Mr. and Miss Lee House.
Did William Jennings Brown married Miss Ruth and Mr.
Yeah.
Well,
But one named Miss Ruth, it was the daughter, it was Mr. Lee House's daughter.
right.
And her husband,
Ruth
Mr.
Garrett,
Jones.
excuse me.
Ruth
yeah.
Garrett, and he was, they had a lot of money because he owned a lot of Miami real estate and he died young. But William Jennings Brown did marry them. They were very religious.
Oh, he ran for president as a Democrat, I don't remember when.
Big, he was a great orator.
And yeah, he's a great orator.
But that doesn't have to do with us, that's
We
Mr. Lee
debate
House.
about,
He was a lawyer
what kind of money we should have, whether we should use paper money or stick to
Yeah, I think so.
gold.
Oh, okay.
Here you go, Nick. Henry Franklin Jr.
Now, Mr. Brown, I do not remember. I don't know whether Jackson might or Pete, Mr. Brown. Brownham's Grove. Any of you know anything about Brownham's Grove? If you go over to Jamestown and go up College Street, and when you get to Jamestown, take a left and cross the railroad. Everything on the west side is Brownham's Grove. And I assume that Mr. Henry Brownham may be a descendant or be the man that owned a lot of that property out there. Now Jim Fagan is a man on the right, and I can describe him by saying that T.A. McCord Sr. came down from Atlanta as an entrepreneur and shined up to Jim Fagan's daughter, Maurice Fagan. And he called up after courting her for some time. He called up Mr. McCord, Mr. McCord called up Miss Fagan. He said, Miss Fagan, I'd like to have an audience with you. And he said, that'd be fine. And he told him when to come. And so he goes out to the big brick house that Fort Bass State owns now, between here and Perry. And he was welcomed into Mr. McCord's, to Mr. Fagan's house. And they sat in the parlor. And Mr. Fagan said, well, Mr. McCord, what can I do for you? And he was a brash Atlanta cracker, you know, and he said, cross his leg, you know, he, big man. He said, well, Mr. Fagan, I want to buy Maurice's shoes from now on. Mr. Fagan was a slight built man, he still has to thin. And he thought a minute, and he said, well, Mr. McCoy, she's in hell of a shape for shoes. Mr. Fagan was one of about 8 or 9 brothers that all farmed, and where Bibb Company is right now was part of the Fagan estate, and so was the house that Fort Bass State owns now. And they were on both sides of the road there too.
And I always heard that if someone, when they got married, someone lived out there and had children, that the children sometimes would go to school on the train. You know, the railroad track, right?
Well,
Isn't that right, Pete? Did you ever hear that?
Just before you get to Bibb Company, where it is out there, there was a beautiful home there where the road turns, and that's where.
You're right, yeah.
Yeah, gorgeous.
Yeah, I think Mr. Brown is Mr. Brown, the leader, if they enter this college street on the right there, where.
On the corner of every square. Well, he could be, but he's, well, I just don't know. But that's the only Brown that I ever knew.
Take note of the Rexall drugstore, Ava's drugstore sign. That's one of the better pictures of that. And again, above there was where the doctor's offices were.
Who was it besides Dr. Smithson?
Dr. Haslett.
Dr. Hassel.
Okay.
James, the Browns were a fine family here in Fort Hatt, and they lived from the corner of Everett Square and
That's, see.
College Street. And their son-in-law was the principal of the high school before Mr. Anderson came.
That was John Clark.
John
That
Clark.
everybody adored. I mean, Bobby Martin says he's the best teacher he ever had. And Bobby Martin went on to be valedictorian and graduated from Harvard, so that has some merit, you know.
All right.
Oh.
Did anybody want to tell us who Billy and Willie? Do any of you recognize them? I think.
I
Maybe.
do.
All right, tell us, maybe.
And Billy Wood and Mr. Williams, is it Williams?
Willie.
Willie.
Really?
And Mr. Billy Wood, I guess he worked for Evans, and I guess he's most noted for the fact that he had 3 exceptionally smart children. Did they all 3 graduate valedictorian?
All valedictorian.
From Fort Valley?
Yeah.
And his second son went on to be an Episcopal preacher. His first son, Bill, what was he?
A doctor.
Okay, and he was
He's a
cute as
physician.
he-
He's a physician.
Was he a heart doctor too? I don't know.
I don't
But he
know
was-
that.
But when they had their reunion, I read his biography thing, and it was the cutest one to die. I mean, he had a lot of humor about it, but he's dead, he died. And then Betty, the oldest child, what about her? Is she still alive? But I tell you,
I don't know.
something, Billy, his first one, had twin daughters. And my mother was in Atlanta one time, and she was walking down Peachtree Street by J.P. Adams, and this nurse with 2 little girls, one on one hand, one on the other, were walking, and one of them stopped and said, "Aren't you Grandmommy's friend from Fort Valley?" One of the twins. So that's sort of impressive, yeah. But he was nice. And then Mr. What did William Williams do? I don't know.
I call Wallace Hardman.
He-
Can you answer that?
Yeah, he was the justice of the peace
All right.
at the courthouse.
Wallace and I, neither one could come up with that.
He was the justice of the peace at the courthouse.
Now, Willie was a slick Willie, is what I would say, and I say that affectionately. But he was you never saw him except at the courthouse. That was the only time you ever saw him. But now he ran around with Mr. Willard Pearson and that crowd, and they'd go down to some springs in Arkansas go down and stay in the springs for about a week at a time.
And I don't think he ever married.
Fishing.
No, he was a bachelor.
Yeah.
Nick, for the health or for fishing?
Well, might have been fishing for help. I don't know. I can't say that.
He lived up on Montrose Street.
Right.
What you got, Pete?
Another recollection about Mr. Billy Woods. They said that he and his wife never had a single argument during their married life. And if one was pending, he would get up and walk out of the house.
I don't know.
Well, I'll add another little note to Mr. Billy Wood. I'm not an Episcopalian, and I don't know what the highest office in the church of the Episcopal Church is, but he attained that at this Episcopal Church.